I'm Rachel Morgan, 26 years old, and I still remember the pressure in my chest. Not from the 3 cracked ribs, but from my mother whispering, "Stay quiet, you'll ruin your brother's future." It was the evening of David's big promotion dinner. My father had opened a $100 bottle of wine my mother was plating. Beef Wellington and I was holding a bottle of whiskey I'd bought with the last bit of my budget. 5 hours later, I'd be in my car clutching the steering wheel, driving home alone, every breath like glass. I never saw it coming. Not really. Not until it was already too late. Before I go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to choose between keeping peace and telling the truth. Hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. I grew up in Willow Run, Illinois, a place where folks smiled through their teeth and reputation was everything. We weren't the richest family in town, but you'd never know it from the way my mother talked. She chaired the charity board at the hospital. She planned garden club luncheons with color-coded binders. My father, Greg, ran a real estate business with his name in gold lettering across a storefront on Main Street. He coached Little League-sponsored local events and once ran for city council, unopposed. They weren't bad people, not in the obvious way. We always had food on the table and the lights stayed on. But love in our house came with conditions. It came with press releases and family photo shoots, and you learned early on what to talk about and what to bury. I was the second child. David came first, 3 years older and bigger in every way. My parents said he had a strong personality, which meant if he broke your toys or shouted you down, you were supposed to let it go. He was the one they said would take over the family business someday, the one who'd carry the Morgan name forward. I was the one who painted too much and asked too many questions. I used to sneak down to the basement and paint for hours. Watercolors, mostly soft colors, wide skies. It was the only place in the house where the air felt still. But when I told my father I wanted to go to art school, he didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just said, "Painting's a hobby, not a career. We're not throwing money into that kind of nonsense." I shelved my brushes that night, packed them into a box, and signed up for pre-med, like a good daughter should eventually. I left for medical school in St. Louis, and for a while the distance helped. It gave me just enough space to breathe. I thought maybe time would change things, or at least soften the edges. But when I came home for good 3 months ago, everything slipped back into place, like it had never left. My new job at the Willow Run Medical Clinic was practical. It helped with my loan forgiveness and let me live close to home. I moved into a small apartment near the edge of town where the streetlights buzzed and the floors creaked a little in the winter. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got my feet under me, just until I figured out what came next. When my mother called about the promotion dinner, she was already deep in planning. She asked if I'd bring a salad and said, "David liked that fancy kale I always used." She wanted the house perfect. Of course, the decorations were in his college colors, blue and white, the same ones she'd used at his high school graduation years before. I arrived early that evening with the salad and the whiskey, hoping maybe if I showed up prepared, maybe if I acted like everything was fine, it actually would be. I didn't know then that I was already standing on the edge of something that wouldn't be fixed with politeness or presence or pretending. The dining room was warm, the lights dimmed low, and everything shimmered just enough to make my mother proud. David sat at the head of the table, his cheeks already flushed after 2 glasses of whiskey. The napkins were folded into little crowns, and the gold-rimmed plates clinked quietly as we passed around the roast. I had offered a toast short, polite, nothing that would draw attention. David had taken it in stride, soaking up every word as if it was owed to him. My parents smiled like they were watching their legacy unfold before them. I stayed quiet through most of dinner, letting David steer the conversation from business to golf to his upcoming weekend at Megan's family's lake house. It was when I mentioned Megan that things shifted. "She invited you to the lake house this summer," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Said it might be nice to have the whole family there." David's smile froze, then slowly faded. He put his glass down without looking at me. "When did you talk to Megan?" he asked. I glanced at my mother, then back at him. "Just last week. I ran into her at the grocery store. We chatted for a bit." He stared at me, jaw tight. "And what else did she say?" "Not much. Just mentioned your dad's old fishing boat might need a little work before the trip." He laughed, but it wasn't his usual kind. "She shouldn't be talking about my family to you." I blinked. "It wasn't like that." He raised his voice. "Last month she said this family was intense after Sunday dinner. Now she's running her mouth again." My mother glanced down at her plate. My father looked toward the window as if something outside had caught his attention. "She didn't mean anything by it," I said. David wasn't listening. "Her family has an alcoholic uncle and a sister who shoplifts, and she's calling us intense, David. You think you're so perfect, don't you?" His words landed hard and sharp. "Dr. Morgan, everyone's little star." I looked at him, unsure what to say. That moment, the pause between his words and my response was when everything tipped. "I think you're misunderstanding." He slammed his glass down. The whiskey spilled bleeding slowly into the white cloth. My mother flinched. My father didn't move. David pushed his chair back with a screech and stood. "I need air." He left the table without another word. The room held its breath. My mother asked about dessert. My father began gathering plates. I followed David into the kitchen with a quiet hope that maybe I could smooth it over before it got worse. He was at the counter pouring another drink. "David, I didn't mean to upset you. You always say that," he said without turning around. "Act sweet, stir things up, and pretend it wasn't your fault. I wasn't trying to stir anything. I like Megan. I just mentioned a boat." He finally turned. His face was red. "You're jealous." I frowned. "Jealous of what? Of me? Of the company? Of Mom and Dad's attention? That's not true." "Yeah. Then why are you always trying to make me look bad?" "I'm not." He stepped closer. "You've always wanted what I had, Rachel. You just hide it behind your degrees and your fake smiles." The words came fast. I barely heard them before I felt the shove. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. He pushed me with one hard motion. My back hit the edge of the granite counter. The sound of it thudded in my ears. For a second I couldn't breathe. Then came the pain. It started in my ribs, spreading outward like fire. I dropped to the floor, trying to get air back into my lungs. My vision blurred. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. My mother screamed from behind me. My father's voice was a blur. "She fell," David said. "She tripped." My hands pressed against the tile. I couldn't lift myself. I couldn't talk. My mother knelt beside me, voice soft. "Can you get up?" I shook my head. I couldn't. It hurt too much. My father grabbed David by the arm, pulled him back. "What did you do?" "Nothing. She's faking it." I managed to speak barely. He pushed me. I hit the counter. My mother looked at me, then at David. "I'm sure it was an accident. I need to go to the hospital," I whispered. "It hurts to breathe." My father crouched next to me. "Let's not overreact. Take something for the pain. Rest a little. If it's still bad in the morning, we'll reassess." "I know what broken ribs feel like," I said. My mother stood up. "I'll drive you. I can drive myself." I didn't want to be near any of them. My father helped me up. I could feel him watching my face for something weakness, defiance, I wasn't sure. "These things happen," he said quietly. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." I didn't answer. I moved slowly every step like a fresh wound until I reached the door. Behind me I could still hear David's voice, still calm, still lying. The ride home was brutal. Every turn of the wheel made my ribs scream. I should have gone to the hospital right away, but I didn't. I went home, told myself it would be better by morning. Told myself maybe this was just another family moment that would get buried like the rest. I spent the night sitting upright in a recliner, barely breathing, afraid that if I moved the wrong way, something worse might happen. The bruise bloomed fast. The pain didn't ease. The next morning I knew it wasn't something I could ignore. I needed help. I didn't sleep much that night. Propped up in the recliner, I kept shifting to find a position that hurt a little less. Every breath came sharp, shallow. The bruise along my side had deepened by morning, turning from red to a sickly purple. I tried to stand, but pain clamped down hard and fast. That was when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. At 7:30, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, she called again. This time, I answered. "Rachel, how are you feeling?" she asked, her voice light too calm. "Not good. I'm in a lot of pain. I can barely move." There was a pause. "These things always feel worse the next day," she said gently. Take some Advil. Ice it. I think my ribs are broken. Another pause longer this time. Sweetheart, it was an unfortunate moment. But let's not make too much of it. David feels awful. Has he said that I asked? He will. He's upset too. But right now we need to move past this. I shifted slightly and felt the stab again. I can't breathe without pain, Mom. This isn't a bruise. If it were that bad, she said you'd have gone to the hospital last night. I closed my eyes. I'm going today. Rachel. Her voice turned low and firm. We need to keep this within the family. I didn't answer. You know what I mean. Questions will be asked. People will talk. It reflects on all of us. I waited. She kept going. Greg's business relies on reputation. And David, he's worked so hard. A misunderstanding like this could really hurt him. It wasn't a misunderstanding. He pushed me. Don't use that word. It was an accident. These things happen in families. She didn't mean to say more, but I heard my father in the background asking for the phone. A moment later, he took over. How are you doing? He asked, voice cool and practiced. Like David. Broke my ribs, I said. I heard you're thinking of going in. I am. Rachel, he said. We both know there's not much they can do for ribs. They'll tell you to rest and take painkillers. That's not the point. I need imaging. I need to know if anything's displaced. He hesitated. And what are you planning to tell them about how it happened? The truth. There was silence on the line. Rachel, he said carefully, I want you to think about what that could mean. He laid his hands on me. He made a mistake. He doesn't deserve to have everything ruined over this. We talked for another 10 minutes. He spoke in circles about damage, about forgiveness, about discretion. By the time we hung up, I was sitting stiffly in the same chair, the phone still in my hand, not quite sure how the blame had shifted in the conversation. Less than an hour later, a delivery arrived. A large gift basket sat on my front porch, wrapped in cellophane with a blue satin bow. Inside were pain pills, bath salts, a lavender heating pad, and a card that said, Rest and recover. Family always comes first. Love, Mom and Dad. I left it unopened on the table. Calls kept coming through the day. My mother checked in every hour. My father's tone grew more forceful. They never used the word cover-up, but every message circled back to the same idea. Keep quiet. Keep it inside. Keep it from becoming public. At 4 p.m, my phone lit up with David's name. I let it ring. Then I picked up. Hey, he said. Mom said I should call. Nothing more. And I guess things got out of hand. I had a lot to drink. You broke my ribs. Come on, I barely touched you. You shoved me into a counter, whatever he said. Look, I'm calling to smooth things over. Mom and Dad are freaking out that you're turning this into some big thing. It is a big thing. I'm injured. We all have bad days, he said. Remember when you totaled my car in high school, I didn't throw a fit. I stared at the wall. That was an accident. This wasn't. He was quiet for a second. Don't be stupid. You'll regret it if you make this worse. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there a long time, phone in my lap, the room still. I could feel my heartbeat against my ribs, each thud a reminder of the night before. Then I called Melanie. She'd been my friend since 9th grade, one of the few who kept in touch after I left for school. She worked as a teacher now, back at our old high school. When I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate. I'm coming to get you, she said. You shouldn't be alone. I have an appointment this afternoon. New primary care doc. A Dr. Hayes. Good. I'll drive you. You don't have to, I'm coming. Text me the address. By the time she arrived, I was dressed slowly, carefully. Every button took effort. I moved like something fragile. She didn't ask questions, just helped me down the stairs, one hand steady on my elbow. We drove in silence most of the way. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't check it. The clinic sat on the edge of town, tucked between a bakery and a strip mall. It was newer than most of the buildings around it, all clean lines and wide windows. The receptionist handed me forms. I left the question blank about how the injury happened. When they called my name, a woman in her 50s greeted me with a soft smile and a firm handshake. Dr. Laura Hayes, she said. Come on back. I followed her into the room slowly, each step careful. "I heard good things about you from the clinic downstate," she said, "but I'm sorry we're meeting like this. Thanks for fitting me in." She glanced at the chart. "Chest pain, trouble breathing." I nodded. "Tell me what happened." I looked down at my hands. I hit the counter. I was pushed. She paused. "Who pushed you, Rachel?" "My brother." She didn't react, just wrote a note, then said, "Let's take a look." The exam was careful, methodical. She listened to my lungs. She pressed along my rib cage, stopping when I winced. Her expression never changed, but something behind her eyes shifted. "I'd like x-rays," she said. "Based on what I'm seeing, I suspect at least 2 fractures, maybe more." The results came quickly. 3 ribs broken, 1 dangerously displaced. When she came back into the room, her tone was steady. "This kind of injury isn't just painful, it's serious. That rib's close to your lung. We'll need to monitor you carefully." I nodded. "Rachel," she said, "you told me your brother pushed you. Was it deliberate?" "Yes." "Has he ever hurt you before?" "Not like this." "But yes." She sat back. "I want to be honest with you. What you've described is domestic violence. I'm required by law to report it." I went still. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll file a report. The police may want to speak with you. You can decide whether to press charges, but the medical record will stand." I looked down. "They're going to be furious." "I understand," she said. "But I also want you to understand something. When I was in my 20s, my father broke my arm. I didn't report it. 2 years later, my mother ended up in the hospital." I looked at her. "I don't tell you that to scare you," she said. "I tell you because I've been where you are, and I wish someone had told me that staying silent didn't protect anyone." I sat quiet for a long time. Then I nodded. "Do what you need to do." Melanie drove me home after the appointment. The sun had dropped behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the road. Neither of us said much. I held the folder of discharge instructions in my lap. My fingers kept tracing the corner where the paper bent over and over again. We got to her place just after 6. She helped me inside, set me up on the couch, and brought over a glass of water without asking. I eased down slowly, one hand braced against my ribs. "I'll grab your things tomorrow," she said. "You're staying here for now." I nodded. That night I kept waking up. The pain was duller with the medication, but the weight of everything else pressed harder. My phone lit up again and again on the nightstand, buzzing until the battery ran low. I didn't check it. The next morning the calls came earlier. I kept the phone silenced, but I could still see their names flash on the screen. My mother, my father, David. By noon, I'd received a dozen voicemails. I didn't play any of them. Melanie made tea and sat with me while I tried to eat something. Around mid-afternoon, I finally listened to one message, just one. My father's voice was low and clipped. "Rachel, I need you to call me. I cannot believe you've involved the police. This has gone too far. You need to fix this." I let the message play through and then deleted it. By evening, my cousin Caroline texted to ask what was going on. My Aunt Susan called twice, leaving a message that I was overreacting and hurting the whole family. Even my grandmother left a voicemail that began with, "Why couldn't this have stayed private?" I didn't answer any of them. It wasn't until later that night that I noticed one new message tucked among the rest. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the name made me sit up straighter. Jessica, the domestic violence counselor Dr. Hayes had mentioned. Her message was calm. She said she was here to help if I wanted to talk. I texted her the next morning and asked if she had time for a call. She called me that afternoon. Her voice was measured, never too loud, never rushed. She told me what to expect, that the backlash I was experiencing, the denial, the pressure, the guilt trips was sadly common in cases like mine. "They're trying to keep things as they've always been," she said, "because your silence made it easier for them to keep the peace." I sat with her words for a long time. She helped me put together a short-term safety plan. We talked through practical things, keeping my phone charged, letting Melanie know where I'd be saving the non-emergency police number. It was all steady quiet, no urgency, just control. A few days later, I went back to my apartment to pack more clothes and grab my work laptop. I moved carefully, avoiding sudden movements that might trigger the ache in my side. I was just zipping up my bag when someone knocked. I knew the sound. My mother's knock was light and quick, almost polite. My father's was firm. They were both standing outside the door. I opened it slowly. "I don't have long. We need to talk," my father said. My mother looked tired, her eyes slightly red. "Please, Rachel." I stepped aside. "Let them in." They didn't sit. They stood just inside the door, eyeing the packed suitcase. "Running away?" my father asked. "Taking care of myself," I said. My mother folded her hands together. "We want to talk this through. I've already spoken to the police. We know my father said. That's why we're here. You need to fix this. He broke my ribs." "It was an accident," my mother said quickly. "He didn't mean to hurt you. He shoved me. He was angry." My father stepped closer. "Rachel, you need to tell the police you want to drop this. Say it was misunderstood." "I can't do that. That would be a lie." My mother's voice cracked. "So you're willing to ruin your brother's future over one mistake? What kind of brother shoves his sister into a counter and then blames her for it?" I asked. My father's face darkened. "Enough." "No," I said. "I've been quiet long enough." "You think we've never supported you?" he asked. "We paid for your education. We gave you everything. You paid for med school because it looked good to have a doctor in the family, not because I wanted it." "That's not true," my mother said. "I wanted to study art. You both laughed when I brought it up." He waved that away. "We're not here to rehash old things. This isn't old. It's now." My father's voice turned sharp. "If you keep going down this road, you're on your own. Financially, emotionally, completely." I nodded. "I already am." "You'll regret this," he said. "I already regret staying quiet for so long." They left without another word. I sat back down and waited for the shaking in my hands to stop. Later that night, David sent a text. "You're dead to Dad. Hope you're happy." I turned off the phone. Melanie didn't say anything when I came back to her place. She just handed me a cup of tea and sat beside me. The silence felt like safety. The next day, Jessica called to check in. I told her about the visit, about what my father said. She didn't act shocked. "That kind of pressure is meant to scare you," she said. "But you're not alone." I asked her what to do next. She helped me make a list. People I could trust, legal resources, a few numbers I might need later. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "Let's talk about what you want your life to look like after this. Not just how to survive, but how to live." I wrote that sentence down. Later that evening, I looked at it again. The pain was still there, dull, steady, but something had shifted. The silence wasn't holding me anymore. Something else was starting to take its place. The letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, delivered by courier in a crisp white envelope with no return address. I opened it slowly, already bracing for what might be inside. It was from my father's attorney. 4 pages neatly typed. No warmth, no hesitation. If I didn't recant my statement to the police and submit a written correction to the medical record, I would face 3 consequences. 1, all remaining financial support, including help with my student loan payments, would end immediately. 2, I would be removed from the family trust. And 3, my parents would release a public statement disowning me. I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and placed it on the kitchen table. Melanie came in from work an hour later and found me sitting in the same spot, the letter untouched, beside a mug of cold tea. "They followed through," I said. She didn't ask what that meant. She picked up the letter, read it silently, then set it down again. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not yet." That night I laid in the dark and stared at the ceiling. The pain in my ribs had dulled, but something else was tightening inside me, coiling slowly with each breath. The choice was clear now. It wasn't about what they would do. It was about what I would allow. In the morning, I called Jessica. She answered on the first ring. "I need help," I said. We talked for almost an hour. She didn't rush. She listened while I read parts of the letter out loud. Then she helped me draw a line between threats and choices, what they could control and what I still had power over. "They are trying to reclaim control through pressure," she said. "That doesn't mean you have to hand it over." That day we made a plan. First, I opened new bank accounts completely separate from the ones my family had access to. Then I changed the locks at my apartment and installed a basic security system. Melanie came with me to the hardware store and helped me carry the ladder when we mounted the camera above the front door. It felt small at first, just practical steps, but each one gave me back a piece of my footing. Next, I met with a lawyer of my own. Her name was Dana Whitaker, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s with steel in her posture. She reviewed the letter, then leaned back in her chair. "This is coercion," she said plainly. "We'll respond if needed. But right now, you don't owe them anything." I nodded. I want to understand what I'm walking into. She explained the implications of being removed from the trust and the loss of financial assistance. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't the end of the world either. I'd worked through residency with barely enough for groceries. I could do hard things. The emotional weight was heavier. Jessica introduced me to a reading list books about dysfunctional family systems, narcissistic parents, and scapegoat roles. I started reading in the evenings. At first, I could only manage a chapter or two before the words started to blur, but I kept going. I learned terms I'd never heard before, learned why families like mine picked one child to carry the blame, why silence was treated like loyalty, why breaking that silence felt like betrayal. The more I read, the more the fog lifted. I wasn't imagining things. One night while reorganizing a shelf in my closet, I found the box with my old watercolors. I hadn't touched them since undergrad. I brought them out to the kitchen table and began painting on a sheet of leftover cardstock. The first image came slow, a simple bluebird with a wing bent at the tip. But there was light behind it. I painted quietly while Melanie cooked dinner across the room. Neither of us said much. The next day, I signed up for a support group. Jessica gave me the address. It met on Thursdays in a church basement with folding chairs and warm coffee in mismatched mugs. There were 6 of us that first night, 5 women and 1 man. No one asked for details. We introduced ourselves with first names only. A woman named Alicia sat beside me. She shared her story about growing up with an older sister who bullied her, and parents who always said, "Don't upset your sister." Her parents cut her off when she finally said no more. She hadn't spoken to them in years. When she finished, she looked down at her hands. Then she looked at me and smiled. "It gets easier." I believed her. The days began to stretch in a new direction. I got back to my normal work schedule. Some coworkers still gave me strange looks in the hallway, but a few came up quietly and said things like, "Good for you," or "If you ever need anything." One morning, I found a note taped to my locker. "You're not the only one who's been through it. Keep going." No name, just those words. The police investigation was still active. I'd given my statement and provided the medical documentation. I hadn't heard much beyond that. Dana said the prosecutor was reviewing everything and would likely move forward without needing me to push. Still, I kept notes. I kept records. I stayed ready. I wasn't sleeping at Melanie's anymore, but we talked every day. Sometimes she brought groceries or dropped off soup when I was working late. She never pushed, never pried. One Sunday she came by just to sit and paint with me. She hadn't picked up a brush in years, but we sat for 2 hours at the table, listening to soft music, painting in silence. When she left, I stood at the window and watched her pull out of the driveway. Then I turned off the porch light and locked the door. Later that week, I brought the bluebird painting to group. Alicia looked at it for a long time, then said, "That wing's going to heal. You can tell." I smiled. By the end of that month, I was doing things I hadn't done in years. Walking in the mornings before work, making my own coffee instead of grabbing it on the way, clearing out old things from my closet, sleeping through the night without waking up at 3 a.m. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was motion. It was mine, and I wasn't moving backward anymore. 2 weeks after the night at the clinic, I returned to Dr. Hayes for a follow-up. The bruising had faded to a yellow-green smear, and the pain had settled into a dull throb. I could take a full breath again. It wasn't comfortable, but it didn't knock the wind out of me anymore. She examined my ribs pressed gently along the healing bone and nodded once. "You're mending well," she said. "Any new symptoms?" "No," I told her. "Just tired, and a little sore at night." She leaned back on the stool and looked at me for a moment. "How are you doing otherwise?" I hesitated, then said, "Physically better. The rest is complicated." She nodded again like she understood. Family trauma usually is. Before I left, I handed her a folded thank you card. She didn't open it, just placed it on the desk beside her clipboard. "Jessica's been incredible," I said. "She connected me to a group that meets on Thursdays." "I'm glad," Dr. Hayes replied. Those meetings helped me too. Back when I finally left home, I didn't know she'd gone through something like this. I didn't ask. It was enough to know she understood. That Thursday, I returned to the church basement and sat in the same chair as before. Alicia arrived a few minutes after I did and sat beside me again. I brought something, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a new painting, this one a small fox curled beneath a cluster of birch trees. Alicia studied it for a while, then smiled. "You're getting your voice back," she said. After the meeting, we walked to our cars together. The sky was turning orange at the edges, and the streetlights had just flicked on. "I haven't spoken to my sister in over 5 years," Alicia said, "and sometimes I still hear her voice in my head. You'll get there." That weekend, I met someone else from the group for coffee, an older woman named Ruth. We talked about our jobs, our families, and how strange it was to feel both grief and relief at the same time. She wore a silver pendant with a small sunflower etched into it. I remember watching the way it caught the light as she stirred her tea. "Boundaries are hard when you've never been allowed to have them," she said. That sentence stayed with me. The next few weeks blurred together. I worked my shifts at the clinic, filled out paperwork for the prosecutor's office, and continued therapy with Jessica. Each day had its own rhythm, some smooth, others messy. One morning, I got an email from the state attorney. They'd decided to move forward with charges. David would be formally charged with domestic battery. I didn't know what that would mean for him yet, or what it would mean for me. But the process had begun. That night, I called Dana to go over next steps. She explained what a plea deal might look like and how the case could unfold depending on his defense. "The most important thing," she said, "is that you don't have to walk into this alone." I wrote that on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside cover of my notebook. Melanie helped me rearrange my apartment. We moved the living room furniture into a new configuration and cleared out an old bookshelf I hadn't touched in years. She insisted we sage the space, something she said her grandmother always did after difficult seasons. We lit the bundle and walked from room to room, the smoke curling through the air in thin ribbons. When we reached the bedroom, she paused at the windowsill. "Anything you want to let go of?" she asked. I didn't say anything out loud, but I thought of the night in the kitchen, the sharp edge of the counter, the weight of my parents' silence, the text that said I was dead to them. Then I opened the window and let the smoke drift out. Jessica called later that week and asked if I wanted to come to a smaller group session, just 3 women, more conversation-based. I said yes. It was quiet that evening, with soft music playing in the background. We each shared something we were working on. One woman had written a letter to her father, but hadn't sent it yet. Another had started journaling again after 10 years. When it was my turn, I said I've started painting every day, just for myself. They nodded, and no one needed more explanation than that. I also started volunteering for a community health outreach program that partnered with the clinic. We gave wellness talks, handed out brochures, and made sure people knew what resources existed for victims of abuse. I didn't share my story. I didn't need to. Just showing up felt like enough. The woman who ran the program introduced herself as Lydia, a retired nurse with a calm presence and kind eyes. She told me I had a grounding energy the kind people trust. One afternoon, she pulled me aside after a planning meeting. "Have you ever thought about running something like this?" she asked. "You've got the steadiness for it." I told her I hadn't thought that far ahead. "Maybe you should." That night I painted another bird, this one flying. I still hadn't heard from my parents again, but I wasn't expecting to. Jessica had warned me that silence could last for months, then break suddenly with another demand. It was a pattern, she said. Push, withdraw, return with conditions. So I waited without waiting. One Friday afternoon, I found a padded envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a silver chain with a tiny locket I recognized from childhood. There was no note. I placed it in a drawer and didn't open the locket. Later that evening, I wrote in my journal about how quiet strength often feels like standing still, but it's actually holding ground when the wind tries to knock you off balance. The prosecutor called the following week. David's attorney had requested a pretrial conference. It wasn't a surprise. Dana said it would likely lead to plea negotiations. We scheduled time to talk the next day. I marked it in my calendar with a small dot instead of a label. That same night, I returned to group. Alicia was there, and Ruth brought a friend who'd just started attending. When we circled up to begin, someone asked what it meant to feel safe again. I didn't know the answer, but I was starting to feel it. Not all the time, but enough to know it was possible. The pretrial conference was scheduled for early March. Dana called the day before to go over what I could expect. We talked through what David's team might argue and what would likely happen next. She reminded me it wasn't a trial, just a meeting between attorneys and the judge to discuss how the case would move forward. I listened carefully, nodding, even though she couldn't see me. That evening, I cleaned my kitchen top to bottom, scrubbed the counters, reorganized the spice drawer, wiped down the cabinet doors. The physical movement helped. When I finally sat down, the apartment smelled like lemon oil and floor polish. The next morning, I dressed simply. Black slacks, a navy sweater. I pulled my hair back into a low ponytail and drove to the courthouse on the east side of Willow Run. Dana met me outside the building and walked with me past security. "I don't expect you to speak today," she said, "but it's your right to attend." The conference was held in a small courtroom with high windows and scuffed wood benches. David was already there, seated with his attorney. He didn't look at me when I walked in. His jaw was tight, arms crossed. The judge entered and everyone stood. What followed was quiet but tense legal terms, passed back and forth questions about timelines, negotiations about possible resolutions. David's lawyer floated the idea of a diversion program instead of a formal plea. Dana pushed back. When the judge asked if I had anything I wanted to say, I stood. "I just want the court to know I didn't come here to punish anyone," I said. "But I do believe what happened should be acknowledged." The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Ms. Morgan." The session ended without a final decision. Another hearing would be scheduled within a few weeks. As we left the building, David brushed past me without a word. That weekend, Melanie came over to help prep for a dinner I was hosting for a few coworkers and friends from the support group. We made pasta and salad and baked a chocolate cake from scratch. Alicia brought fresh bread. Ruth showed up with a pot of soup and a sunflower in a jar. My small apartment filled with laughter and warm light. I looked around the table watching people serve each other seconds and pass napkins and ask about each other's kids. It felt easy, steady. The next afternoon, I met with Dr. Hayes at a cafe near the hospital. We were finalizing details for a new community health initiative on domestic violence awareness, something I'd quietly started helping her plan in January. We outlined topics for the first training session, including how to spot subtle signs of abuse during routine checkups. Dr. Hayes flipped through her notes, then looked up. "You're a natural at this. I just want patients to feel seen," I said. "They will," she replied. "You've turned this into something meaningful." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Later that night, I received a call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. "We need to talk. Please." I didn't call back right away. I sat with it for a while, weighing the tone. It didn't sound like a demand. It didn't sound like anger, just tired. 3 days later, another message came, this time from my father. "We'd like to meet. Just talk. We'll follow your terms." I forwarded the message to Jessica. She called the next morning. "Are you ready to have that conversation?" "I think I am." She helped me set some boundaries. The meeting would be on neutral ground at a counselor's office. No surprises. No dismissing what happened. If they couldn't follow those rules, I could leave at any time. We scheduled it for the following Tuesday. The counselor's office sat at the edge of downtown, a quiet converted house with a small waiting room and soft blue walls. Dr. Morgan, the family therapist, greeted me with a gentle handshake. My parents arrived a few minutes later. My father was in a dark suit. My mother wore pearls and carried a folder I never saw her open. They looked smaller than I remembered. We sat in a circle. Dr. Morgan opened with introductions and ground rules. Then she looked at me. "Rachel, would you like to begin?" I nodded. "I'm here because I want to be honest about what happened and how it affected me. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to hurt anyone, but I won't pretend anymore." My mother looked down at her lap. My father cleared his throat. "We want to find a way forward. This has gone far enough." Dr. Morgan raised her hand gently. "Let's stay with Rachel's experience for now." I spoke for 10 minutes. I talked about the night in the kitchen, about the silence that followed, about the messages and the pressure and the legal threats. I kept my voice steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't soften it. When I finished, there was a long pause. My mother finally spoke. "I didn't know what to do. You told me to stay quiet. I didn't want the family to fall apart. I didn't respond." My father shifted in his seat. "We've always tried to do what's best. For the family image," I said. "Not for me." Dr. Morgan gently guided the conversation forward, but the pattern was clear. They wanted reconciliation. They didn't want change. They wanted me back, but only if I left the truth behind. Near the end of the session, David's name came up. "He's struggling," my mother said. "He says he doesn't know how to fix this. He broke my ribs." "We know," she said softly, "but we miss you." I looked at her. Then I looked at my father. "I'm still here," I said, "but I'm different now, and I won't go back to pretending." Dr. Morgan nodded. "That's an important boundary." As the meeting ended, my father reached into his coat pocket and handed me a letter. "No pressure. Just read it when you're ready." I didn't open it. Back home, I tucked the letter into the top drawer of my desk and poured a glass of water. I stood at the window for a long time watching the evening light fall across the buildings. Whatever came next, I knew the ground beneath me was my own. The letter from my father sat unopened for nearly a week. Every morning, I'd see it in my desk drawer, a neat white envelope with my name in his careful handwriting. I wasn't avoiding it so much as waiting, letting the days settle and the noise quiet down inside me. When I finally opened it, I read the words slowly, line by line. He wrote about regrets and choices, how he wished things had turned out differently. He didn't apologize for what had happened, but he did say he missed having me in their lives. My mother sent a card 2 days later. It was short. "I hope someday we can talk and find our way back. Love always, Mom." I wasn't sure what to feel. The ache was there, but so was a sense of distance, like I was seeing my family through a window, not from inside their house anymore. For the first time, their hopes and disappointments didn't shape the air I breathed. The plea deal came through soon after. David would take probation, mandatory counseling, and community service. It wasn't justice in the way some people might picture, but it was the first time anyone in my family faced any consequence for their actions. That mattered more than I expected. I didn't feel victorious. Mostly, I felt still like a storm had passed, leaving the world a little clearer, if not entirely healed. In the months that followed, I found a quiet rhythm. I led support groups with Alicia and Ruth, sometimes just sitting in a circle listening as others shared stories of surviving what they thought they'd never name out loud. Dr. Hayes and I worked side by side on the health initiative training other providers to listen for what isn't spoken. Melanie became my chosen family, and our dinners, sometimes just soup and bread, became the place I could always return to. Even my Aunt Barbara called, reaching out to meet for coffee on a rainy Sunday. I kept painting. My apartment slowly filled with images, small birds, fields after a thunderstorm, a narrow path through tall birch trees. I didn't hide my art anymore. It was never about perfection. It was about seeing the light after the shadows. I still heard from my parents every now and then. A birthday card, a text at Thanksgiving. I answered when I felt ready. The conversations stayed gentle, never going back to old wounds, but never pretending the past hadn't happened. I realized forgiveness wasn't a door swinging open all at once. Sometimes it was just a window cracked for fresh air. Looking back, I know now that healing isn't always loud or sudden. It's the quiet decision to honor your truth, to step away from the patterns that hurt you, even if it means starting over. Dignity doesn't come from being perfect or pleasing others. It comes from standing up quietly and fully for your own well-being. Justice for me was never about revenge or victory. It was about creating a life where kindness and honesty are possible, and where I can greet each day without shame or fear. If my story feels familiar, if you've ever chosen peace over silence or had to start over on your own terms, I hope you know you're not alone. Sometimes the family we build from honesty and care is the one that truly lasts. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, I'd be honored if you shared your own story or simply took a moment to reflect on what dignity and healing mean to you.